I'm Charlotte McLeod with investingnews.com, and here today with me are Rob McEwen, Chairman and Chief Owner of McEwen Mining, and Michael Metting, Vice President and General Manager at McEwen Copper. Thank you both so much for being here. Great to have you.
Pleasure. Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you so much, Charlotte.
Of course, really good to be speaking with both of you again. And it's only been a few months since our last conversation, but a lot has happened. We're, of course, as usual, going to talk about what's happening at McEwen Mining and McEwen Copper. But as usual, before we go there, I thought that we would take a broader look at what's going on in the gold and copper markets. So beginning with gold, I'll ask you, Rob, we've seen all-time highs in gold since we last spoke. And I think that when investors are looking at what's going on with the gold price, they're starting to feel like this is a real move. So I was going to ask, moving forward into 2024, do we need to see some consolidation in the gold price, or do we have space to move higher this year?
I think we have space to move higher, and you're starting to see a number of large names in the investment industry predicting higher prices. You had Citibank come out and say $3,000 before the year's out. Bloomberg came out and said $7,000 for 2025. So that's not very far away. And then you had Pierre Lassonde enter into the game and say $19,000 to $20,000. I just feel, central bank buying has been at a record for the last 30 years, 40 years. Last year and the year before. The BRIC countries divesting of dollars and moving into other assets to hold on to, such as gold, has been a big factor as well. The whole sector has been underinvested for quite a while, and I think it's poised to move. Inflation isn't going away, and even when interest rates rose in the late 70s and early 80s, gold was climbing. It's heading higher. And copper, the other day someone sent me an article from the London Financial Times. There's been people saying, all right, Goldman Sachs, copper is the new oil. There's a shortage developed. Well, this was some commodity fund manager, and he had in the next 3-4 years, he put out a $40,000 per tonne copper price, which I thought was a little high, but that's some of the scope that you're seeing in this market right now, that people feel there's a real shortage. There's not a lot of new mines coming on stream. A lot of the existing mines are seeing their grade falling and as such, their production falling. So it's a positive environment for gold and copper buyers, silver buyers too.
Okay, I think really good to go over that. And I'll ask Michael about copper as well in just a moment. But before we leave off on gold, I wanted to mention one point that we spoke about earlier in the year, which was, I think in that past conversation about 3 months ago, investors were looking at what the gold price was doing, and they were looking at what was happening with gold stocks and feeling some frustration that gold stocks weren't moving as much as they hoped. Now I think that's beginning to change, and I wanted to get your sense of what you're seeing happen there with the gold stocks and whether you feel like they have now at least begun to respond to what the price is doing.
With the price up over $2,000 an ounce, people are looking at junior explorers and saying, what have they found, and could that really grow? You're watching the high-cost producers suddenly start performing because now they're moving into the positive territory on their earnings. And there's some M&As still going around as people say, well, maybe it's faster and possibly cheaper to buy the ounces than drill and wait for the results. So companies with, indicated and measured resources, I think, that are still lagging behind are subject to a possible consolidation. It has in the past, it's moved, and I think we're moving into a period like that again.
Okay, that will be interesting to keep an eye on, definitely. And now, Michael, I'll ask you about copper. I know it's exciting to go over what's going on in gold, but definitely can't forget copper, which also, I believe, recently hit its own all-time high, although briefly. So we've been talking for some time about the inevitable copper supply crunch and what that could mean for prices. But for me, I don't think I was expecting prices to move quite so soon. So for you, when you look at what's going on in copper, what do you think has sparked this price increase that we've seen?
I think there's a short-term crunch in terms of supply, but more importantly, there's a long-term demand outlook that is very strong. I mean, depending on who you ask in terms of forecasting agencies, there's a demand between 2035 and 2050 of somewhere between 50 and 68 million tons of copper, where the world at the moment consumes about 25 million tons of copper per year, out of which 20 is from mines and 5 is from recycling. That means that if you compare this to the biggest producer, which is Chile, with somewhere between 5.5 and 6 million tons, that means we need somewhere between 5 and 8 times Chile on top of what we currently have to be able to satisfy that demand going forward. So, I mean, even if you don't subscribe to those very progressive outlooks, copper has a very positive momentum and is slated to stay significant over the next decades, in terms of price support.
Okay, and Rob, I know you talked a little bit about copper briefly at the beginning, but did you have anything to add on dynamics right now and why we started to see the price move at this time?
I don't have firsthand. I read some reports. There was a short position out there and someone expected the price to fall, and it hasn't, and they're scrambling to cover their shorts. And I think that's probably going to be a theme going through the metals market. I mean, it was a space everybody didn't have a lot of optimism about. And so there were people shorting a lot of metals, a lot of stocks, and they're suddenly finding that was the wrong bet to make. And most of the trading is certainly in the stocks was thin. So trying to cover a position drives the price up much faster.
Okay, and I'll go back to Michael. During our last conversation, we spoke about Argentina's new mining-friendly government and what that could mean for McEwen Copper as well as Los Azules. So at that time, it was still pretty early into this regime change. So I wanted to check in now and see what changes you started to see so far.
So what we have seen is that it's something that already started during the presidential election. I mean, there was a clear understanding from the different candidates at the time that mining would be seen as a major building block for the economy for Argentina for the future. Just to give you an idea, I mean, if you take the 5 largest or the 5 projects that are most advanced in terms of copper, they could be about 20% of what Argentina exports at the moment in their agricultural sector, which is the engine for Argentina's progress. So the thing is that within a very short amount of time, just 5 copper projects could have a very significant space, and Los Azules is one of them. And what is also interesting to see is now with President Milei in power, which the team and Rob can probably talk about that in a minute, had the pleasure to meet and to discuss his plans for Argentina and how we can contribute with Los Azules. What is interesting is, I was just at the mining fair in South One that ran over 3 days, and that's where our project is located in the province of South One. Every 2 years there's a mining fair here. And what was interesting to see is the attention the mining fair has received. Over 22,000 attendees in those 3 days. There were over 22,000 registrations in total. And what is interesting is that besides the attendance of a total of 8 governors here in the province, which is outstanding, we also saw a lot of diplomatic personnel, embassies, the Canadian, the German, the Brazilian, and others that attended this mining fair. And I think this is just testament to the importance that mining can play in Argentina, but also a testament to the importance of critical minerals to the world, as we can see through the attendance of all the embassies. So it's really a significant shift, both politically as well as geopolitically, that we see that has driven this interest in this mining fair.
That is very interesting. Thank you for going over that. And I'll go back over to Rob. So Michael, you had mentioned that Rob had the chance to meet with President Milei, and I'm wondering if you could share some takeaways from that meeting.
Certainly. Our meeting lasted about an hour. In the first 15, 20 minutes, he was outlining what he hopes to achieve in the country and set it on a track that it becomes an attractive destination for foreign capital. As Mike said, it is removing the foreign exchange controls, putting in a stability agreement to calm the concerns of investors about expropriation or excess taxes, lowering the tax rate significantly. We did a rough calculation just on our copper project, and if they do what they're talking about, you could conceivably see an improvement in the net present value of the project of $1 billion. So it would, I sense there were, certainly at the PDAC in March in Toronto, there were a number of people. It was like they were standing on one side of a fence and Argentina was on the other, and they were looking in and saying, if he's really able to do this, this is a country that's rich in natural resources and could become quite a center of mining. When I asked him if he knew the story of Sleeping Beauty, and he said yes. So they said, well, Argentina is this beauty with rich natural resources, and she was put to sleep by the nasty populist governments of the past. And he's come along, and he's the prince, and he's kissing her and waking her up. He liked being called the prince, but that's really what's happening here. That, I mean, along the spine of South America, you get 40% of the world's annual production of copper. If those other mines came in, those other deposits next to Los Azules are brought in, suddenly those Argentina plus those 2 other countries will be producing over 50% of the world's annual production of copper. I mean, it's serious. It's very encouraging. He talked about his popularity has gone up since he was elected, despite the fact that the inflation is still very high. So his popularity has gone up. He's been able to generate a budgetary surplus, trade surplus rather, and there are a lot of people that are commenting in a very positive way about Argentina now, and optimistic and hopeful that he's able to put this through. So I think there'd be a rush of companies going in there if it looks like you can have a sustained lower tax rate and a stability agreement. So it's a good place to be right now, I think. It's a seismic change in the politics.
It does sound big. And of course, so as all of this is going on, I believe McEwen Copper has recently completed drilling for a feasibility study for Los Azules, and with that due to be complete in the first quarter of 2025. So I was going to ask Michael, so that's first quarter of 2025, we're about a year away from that. What is work at Los Azules going to be looking like over the next year or so as you move toward that?
So we're going to do 2 things. First of all, we're going to continue with all the technical works, with the engineering required to get to feasibility and level of accuracy for the publishing of our feasibility by first half of next year. End of Q1 is, as you said, that's the plan. On the other hand, we put out a press release 16th of May, where we showed not only the potential to extend significantly our deposit. We have seen extension to 400 meters to the north of the pit, about 700 meters to the south. So there's additional work that we can decide to do to further expand this already very, very vast resource base. And on top of that, we have done some work about 3 kilometers to the east of what we call La Ballena, so the wellback where Los Azules is located, and that's within our properties as well. And we did some exploration work, we did some prospecting work, we did some hyperspectral work, we did some geophysics. Then we decided to drill a hole, and we thought, well, it would be on the outer edge of what we consider to be a significant anomaly. We have seen an anomaly of about 2 by 2.5 kilometers on surface, and we are currently obtaining geochemistry for that hole. But based on what we have seen from our geos, we think there's a mineralized porphyry system there, and that's something that we want to put on the table to be further developed as we approach again spring and summer in this year in the southern hemisphere. So that will be the work coming in October, November this year.
Okay,
It's very exciting.
It is very exciting, and so lots to do, but very exciting. Okay, and one thing I want to ask, so we've been talking a lot about what's going on at McEwen Copper, but of course McEwen Mining has assets in areas other than Argentina. And as we see with Argentina, changes in government can really make a big impact on the mining industry, or we can see that perhaps they will going forward. And of course, so we also have coming up election in the US. And I was going to ask you, Rob, so it looks like we're heading toward war Biden or war Trump. And we've seen both of them in presidency. We now know kind of what that looks like. So as we head toward this election, what considerations are there between these two choices for the mining industry in the US?
Biden shut down the Keystone pipeline. He's increased the cost for holding claims in the U.S., changing the mining law there. Rather than shortening the permitting time, he has extended permitting time. And what's really curious there, the U.S. Department of Energy was putting money into Africa to develop a rail line to get at Tanzanian copper. And I thought, isn't this strange? They're looking for critical minerals. They're scouring the world for them, putting money in different countries when, in fact, there's a lot of potential still in America. And it seems very peculiar to me that they're spending money outside the country when they could be encouraging expenditures in the country, creating employment, a stronger tax base. So they seem to be saying one thing, we need these, but trying to kill the industry at home. So I would say Trump is probably more inclined to favor the development at home rather than Biden.
That sounds pretty likely, I think, based on what we know of the two. All right. So before I let you go, I did want to check in with what's going on at McEwen Copper in terms of developments. So recently, the company has released its Q1 results. So I was going to check if there are any highlights you would want to share there. And about a month ago, the company announced plans to acquire Timberline Resources. So again, was going to ask you if there are any highlights you would share there for investors, maybe talking about the rationale between that acquisition.
Okay. McEwen Mining has, since we closed on our first financing for McEwen Copper, has increased, and that'd be since the beginning of September 2022, is up 300%, outperforming gold, silver, copper, Dow, NASDAQ, GDXJ by a very wide margin. So we have some development projects, one in Timmins at our Fox complex. We'll be starting to drive a ramp on our Stock West deposit and going over to Stock East. That opens up and extends the life by about 6 years. We're drilling over at our Grey Fox property where there's already 1 million ounces defined. And recently, we put out a release today that our geologists, it's conceptual, but think that the Grey Fox deposit of 1 million ounces is sitting on top of the Black Fox mineralization. And Black Fox has already produced 1 million ounces at the mine, but there's a 3-kilometer distance between Grey Fox and Black Fox that hasn't been well explored. So rather excited by the deeper targets. And then down in Nevada, you mentioned Timberline. It's about 30 kilometers away from our Gold Bar operation. And we feel there's material we could take from there that's already broken and put on our heap leach pad, extending Gold Bar. But we also think there's quite a bit of potential sitting at Timberline. So that's another attempt to extend the life by going after what's close to our existing operations to share the cost of G&A and that over a larger production base. And then we're Los Azules. Mike assembled a huge drill crew down there. He had 22 drills on the property at Los Azules, making it probably one of the most active drill sites in South America. And between when we put the PEA out for Los Azules last June and now, there's 100,000 meters of drilling results from that to go into the bankable feasibility study. And there, as Mike said, we've been able to find mineralization 400 meters to the north of our model pit and 700 meters to the south. Granted, it looks like at both ends it's going deeper, but it's still showing there's mineralization. And then 3 kilometers away to the east, we're picking up copper oxide on surface. We're picking up veining similar to Los Azules, and a moly signature that suggests moly's often associated with copper being more mobile. There's another area there that only one drill hole, no assays yet, some visuals that you see a gleam in the geologist's eyes, but we have to wait for the assays. But that could open a whole new realm, and that in turn lifts the value of McEwen Mining's interest in Los Azules. Right now, we wanted to separate it so we could finance it separately without diluting McEwen Mining. And we've been able to raise the value from 200 to 800 millions through our investments and some of the partners that have come in. Fourth largest car manufacturer and the second largest mining company.
And all right, that was really good to go through. And on that note, I'll turn it back over to Michael and ask if there's any final thoughts that you would leave investors with.
Well, I think that Argentina is certainly a country to look at, specifically the province of San Juan. So there's lots of activity going on now, and we think in the future. And let's stay tuned for the assay results on our exploration.
I could say, because I'm a gold bug, I look, and I may have shared this with you before, Charlotte, that I look at a non-gold deposit and try to put it into a gold equivalent to get a sense of its size and importance. So allow me just to say, if you took the current copper price, which is about 23.52 last couple of minutes ago, and the current copper price of 4.68, divide 4.68 into the copper price into the gold, and it takes 503 pounds of copper to equal 1 ounce of gold. Divide that 503 into our resource base of indicated and inferred of 37.6 billion pounds of copper. That equates to 75 million ounce gold equivalent deposit. If you look at the projected annual production of 321 million pounds of copper a year over the 27-year life of this mine, that's equivalent to about 640,000 ounces a year at a cash cost of $1.07 a pound. That's $540 an ounce equivalent, and cash and all in $825. Now, to me, that's a really big gold deposit. And if you were to look at the Timmins Gold Camp, one of the most prolific gold producing areas in the country, over the last 100 years, it's produced 70 million ounces of gold. Here we're looking at one deposit equivalent to 100 years of production from Timmins. So it's a big, very profitable, projected to be very profitable. If you can produce it at $1.07 a pound, and it's trading at $4.70 right now, heading to 40,000 tonne. It's an interesting deposit, and it's large, and we're putting a lot in it, push it as quickly as we can.
Okay, I think that's a nice place to wrap up. I enjoy that comparison. I think it's very helpful to look at it in those different ways. So thank you both very much for going over what's going on at McEwen Mining, as well as McEwen Copper, and in the gold and the copper markets.
All right. Thanks, Charlotte. Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And once again, I'm Charlotte McLeod with investingnews.com, and this is Rob McEwen and Michael Mining. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe to our channel. We'd also love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a comment below. We'll see you next time.